first graders. Today I'm going to be reading you a very famous folk tale. And this folk tale, you may have heard it before, is called Little Red Riding Hood. It's going to be retold and illustrated by Trina Short Hyman. Now remember, a folk tale is make-believe. Oftentimes it'll have a character or animals that act like people, but that doesn't happen in real life, right? And it's usually a story passed down from time to time that teaches us a lesson. Let's go ahead and jump in. Usually they begin with once upon a time. Let's see if this one does. Okay, let's see. Little Red Riding Hood by the Brothers Grimm, retold and illustrated by Trina Short Hyman. Here it begins. Let's see. Once upon a time. It did. It began with once upon a time. Once upon a time, there was a little girl named Elizabeth who lived with her mother in a house on the edge of a village. She was loved by all who knew her, but she was especially dear to her grandmother, who loved her more than anything in the world. One day the grandmother sewed a red velvet cloak with a hood, and she gave it to Elizabeth for her birthday. It looked so pretty, and she liked it so much that she would never wear anything else, and therefore everyone called her Little Red Riding Hood. And you can see there she is with Grandma, who she's very special to. Early one morning, her mother said to her, "Come here, Red Riding Hood, and listen to me. I want you to take this loaf of fresh bread, and I want you to take some of this sweet butter and a bottle of wine to your grandmother. She is sick in bed. She is sick, and that will do her a world of good. So go right away before the sun gets too hot. Promise me that you won't daydream, and you won't stray off the path, and don't run, or you will fall down and break the bottle, and then there will be no wine for grandmother, or the food could get ruined. So be good. When you see Grandma, remember your manners. Say good morning, please, and thank you nicely, without staring round about you or sucking on your finger. Don't stay too long, or you will tire out grandmother. And when you have had a nice visit, you come straight home." "Yes, Mama," said Little Red Riding Hood. "I promise I will do just as you tell me." So she's to go and bring Grandma the food and come straight home, right? Stay on the path. Don't run. Now her grandmother lived in a cottage in the middle of the forest. It was a good half-hour walk from the village, but Little Red Riding Hood, she knew the way, so she was not afraid to go all by herself. When she had walked far enough into the woods to feel just a little bit lonely, who should she meet but a sly and hungry old wolf? She had no idea what a wicked animal he was, however, so she was not at all frightened of him. "Good morning, Red Riding Hood," he said. "Good morning." Red Riding Hood said, "Good morning, Wolf." She answered. She was polite. "Where are you off to so early in the day, my dear?" he asked. Now, in real life, can wolves really talk? No, it's make-believe, right? It's a folk tale. I wonder what the lessons are that Red Riding Hood is going to learn. Remember, a folk tale teaches a lesson. I want you to really pay attention, because you're going to tell me what lesson you think Red Riding Hood learned. She learns more than one. "I'm going to grandmother's. She is sick in bed, you know." "Is that so?" he murmured. "And what have you got in your basket?" A loaf of bread and some sweet butter and a bottle of wine. Mama and I baked it yesterday, so I'm taking a loaf to grandmother. It will do her a world of good." Now, isn't that nice? And where does your grandmother live, Little Red Riding Hood? "Oh, it's a good 15 minutes farther into the wood. Her house is the one by those 3 big oak trees, right next to the blackberry hedge, and there's a stream running by her garden." Surely you know the place," said Little Red Riding Hood. Should she be talking to a stranger? I don't think her mom would like that. The wolf thought to himself, "Aha! This tender little creature will be a plump morsel to eat, a good dessert after the old woman. I must be clever about this so that I can make a good meal out of the two of them." He walked along with Little Red Riding Hood for a while, just making polite conversations. Then he said, "Just look at those beautiful wildflowers, Red Riding Hood. They are a sight even for my tired old eyes. For goodness sake, why don't you relax a bit? Look at the world and see how lovely it is. And then why don't you enjoy the sunshine and hear the birds sing? You are just as solemn as well-behaved as you were going to school. Everything else is so lovely and happy out here in the forest." Do you think she should take a break or go straight to Grandma's? Trying to remember what Mom said. Then Little Red Riding Hood looked away from the path, and when she saw the sunlight dancing through the trees and the wild flowers and the butterflies scattered throughout the ferns, she thought, "I'm sure that Grandmother would feel happier if I took her a bunch of flowers. They are a sight for tired old eyes, I know, and it is still quite early in the day. I'll have plenty of time to pick them." So she excused herself and said goodbye to the wolf and wandered off among the trees to pick flowers. Each time she picked one, she always saw another even prettier farther away, and so she left the path, and she went deeper and deeper into the forest alone. Meanwhile, the wicked wolf went straight off to the grandmother's cottage and knocked softly at her door. The wolf has snuck off to Grandmother's house. Do you think Grandmother will be safe? "Who's there?" called the grandmother from her bed. "It's me, Little Red Riding Hood," said the wolf in a tiny voice. "I've brought you a loaf of bread, some sweet butter, and a bottle of wine. Let me in." "You'll have to lift the latch and let yourself in, dear," the grandmother called out. "I'm feeling too weak to get out of bed." So the wolf lifted the latch and opened the door. He ran straight to the bed, and without even saying good morning, he ate up the poor little old grandma in one gulp. Then he put her on a clean nightgown, her clean nightgown on, and shawl that were laying on a chair by the bed, and he got into bed. He pulled the bed curtain closer together. Oh, he is a wicked wolf. What do you predict will happen next? Well, in the meantime, Little Red Riding Hood wandered here and there, picking flowers, until she had such an armful she could barely hold them all. Then she suddenly remembered her grandmother and the promise she had made to her mother. So she found her way back to the path and walked straight to the cottage. When she got there, she was amazed to find the door was open, so she tiptoed in. She felt quite frightened, but she wasn't sure why. What's wrong, she thought. I always liked coming to Grandmother so much. Why should I feel so afraid? Can it be because she is sick? Or maybe because the door is open, right? That's not normal. "Good morning, Grandmother," she called, but there was no answer. Then she went quickly into the bedroom and pulled the bed curtains back. There lay her grandmother, but she had drawn her shawl down over her face, and she looked very, very cold. Red Riding Hood couldn't help but stare. "Grandmother, what big hairy ears you have grown," she said. "Oh, the better to hear you with, my dear." Does it look like Grandma? Do you think Little Red Riding Hood should stay? It doesn't look safe. "Oh, Grandmother, your eyes are so shiny. The better to see you with, dear." "Your hands look so strange, Grandmother. The better to catch you and hug you with, my dear." "Please, Grandmother, why do you have such big, sharp teeth?" "Those are to eat you up with, my dear. As the wolf said this, he sprang out of bed and ate up poor Little Red Riding Hood. Then, having finished his first good meal in many weeks, that wicked wolf went back to bed. He pulled the covers up and soon was snoring as loudly as you can imagine, probably because he had a full belly. Not after long, a huntsman from the village appeared and happened to be passing by the grandmother's cottage. By Jiminy, he thought, the old lady is snoring much too loudly. Maybe I should stop in and see if anything is the matter with her. So he went right into the house and up to the bed, where he saw the wolf fast asleep in the grandmother's nightgown and shawl, with a fat stomach full to bursting. What do you predict the hunter will do? Well, right away the huntsman guessed what had happened. So here you are, you old sinner, the huntsman said. I've been looking for you all these years, and now this is where I find you. He raised his gun to shoot, but then he wondered if the wicked old wolf might have swallowed the grandmother whole, and if perhaps there was a chance she might still be saved. So he took out his knife and quickly killed the wolf while he lay sleeping. Then he carefully cut open the wolf's stomach. Who do you think he'll find inside? Now, is this real or make-believe? Remember, this is a folk tale. It is make-believe. At the first cut, he saw the red velvet cloak, and after a few more slashes, a little girl jumped out and cried, "Oh, thank you. I was very frightened. It was so dark inside the wolf." Next, the grandmother climbed out, alive but hardly able to breathe from the fright and exhaustion. They thanked the huntsman with all their hearts, and he was so glad to see them both alive and well that he hugged Little Red Riding Hood and he shook the grandmother's hand over and over again. I bet they feel better. Was your prediction right? Did you predict they would climb out okay? Well, they were all quite happy, and the huntsman skinned the wolf and took the pelt home to nail on his door. Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother sat down together to eat the fresh bread and sweet butter. The grandmother drank some of the wine, and Red Riding Hood had a cup of blackberry tea. After a while, the grandmother felt quite strong and healthy and began to clean up the mess the wolf had left in her cottage. You see, she's hanging up clothes even. As Little Red Riding Hood walked home through the wood, she thought to herself, I will never wander off the path again. Yeah, you are not supposed to wander. You're supposed to stay where you are as long as I live. And I should always keep a promise to my mom. Yeah, if you make a promise, you have to keep it. And if your mom tells you something, you always listen, right? And are you supposed to talk to strangers? No, Little Red Riding Hood. She was comforted that she had at least minded her manners. She had always said, good morning, please, and thank you. Okay, so a folk tale teaches a very important lesson. And Little Red Riding Hood learned a lot of lessons. Let's get out our Read and Respond notebook. Here's mine. Mine's pink. Yours might be another color. Pause it if you need to so you can get yours. And then come back. And we are going to write about what the important lesson is. What lesson did you think was most important for Little Red Riding Hood that she learned? So find your next open page. Here's mine. And we're going to start off by saying Little Red Riding Hood learned. Now it's a name, Little Red Riding Hood. So it's going to have all capital letters for her name. Let's start off with little. Oh, lit. Little. Little. Remember, capital, little, space, then red, capital, because it's her name, R-E-D, Little Red. And now we're going to go now, Riding Hood, capital again, riding, riding. And ing is always I-N-G. Little Red Riding Hood, hood. And it's a capital again, still her name, H-O-O-D, learned. What lesson do you think she learned? There was quite a few, But what lesson did you feel was most important? And then you're going to draw and color in your picture. What was the lesson that Little Red Riding Hood learned from this folk tale? I can't wait to hear what you chose in the morning. Bye, firsties.